All right, we're going to try to do a 10-minute video once a week. It's going to help people working through any number of symptoms that they're currently experiencing. Now, this has nothing to do with determining whether or not you have coronavirus. I'm worried about other kind of symptoms that may start to arise because life now is being done a whole lot differently than we were used to. So when you're in a new environment, a new situation, there are natural tendencies that start to occur both in your mind, you feel it in your body, certainly the emotions play a huge role in this. So you might now be feeling certain things, and you need to be careful with how you feel and understand, is it a symptom or do you need to have a diagnosis that reveals something? And then eventually what we're going to get to then is the cure and how to care for yourself when you're feeling certain symptoms. And all of this is going to come out of Philippians chapter number 4, verses 4 through 9. You're welcome to turn there in your scriptures with me if you'd like. Now, I'm just suggesting 5 feelings right now. I'm not saying that these are necessarily yours. You might have other feelings. You should be aware of those, take note of those things. But I am saying that there are symptoms that are going to start arising in our lives that are going to be feeling based, and we need to understand how to deal with those. Obviously, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of worry. Fear and worry lead to anxiety. Anxiety causes all kinds of behavioral issues that can lead to depression or can lead to responses that are unhelpful or unhealthy. People that are kind of now doing life differently, driven by fear and worry, will have responses that are rooted in what they are feeling. We need to be aware of that. Anger is another one. We all know that in times when people are together, they're not used to being together all the time. People get angry. Their space is being invaded. Toys aren't being shared. They don't like the same meal. Whatever it might be. And angry responses can arise, and that can lead to increase of domestic violence or mistreatment of children or women or pets for that matter. So we need to be careful about what we feel as it has to do with worry and fear and anger. Loneliness is a big one. Now, some of you who have a lot of folks in your home, so I'm not lonely. Okay, that may not be what you feel. But there are a number of people, right, who now are quarantined alone. And they're feeling a bit lost. You know, they're introverts. They like maybe being alone. But nevertheless, loneliness is a feeling for people, whether they are actually alone or even with people. There are many times when I'm with people, but I feel very lonely. And so loneliness is something we feel. I think there's an increase of distrust. Do we trust what the government is saying? Do we trust what the leaders are saying? Do we trust what the reporters on TV or the reporters in the newspaper? You know, and distrust is going to rise in society the longer this progresses. And sometimes distrust then leads to unrest, bad decisions that affect other people, friends, neighbors, family. And so what you feel is very important to see it as a symptom. Sometimes what we feel is real. Most of the time what we feel is driven by something else. Fear, worry, anger, loneliness, or distrust. So if we think about the symptom, then we need to think a little bit about the diagnosis. Most people would say, well, the diagnosis, is get rid of my fear, worry, anger, loneliness, and distrust. Get rid of those things, and then I'll be okay. But the diagnosis needs to be understood as what is true in your life that can then give an answer to the symptoms. So in Philippians 4, verses 4 through 9, you have this instruction, rejoice. And so some people would say, well, the reason you're feeling these things is because you're not rejoicing. And you need need to rejoice. And so I would suggest that's not correct. That's not what the text is telling us. The text is not telling us that the way to deal with your symptoms is to rejoice. So it's not rejoice. The diagnosis, the real issue going in your life that creates these feelings is that you have forgotten that the Lord is near. And this is very critical to the Christian giving the right response when they begin to feel something and those feelings begin to take over their lives. Somebody will say, well, you don't have to worry. Just rejoice. The Lord's got it all under control. You don't need to be angry. Just rejoice. God's got this, or some such thing. But for people who say, well, listen, I still feel this. The diagnosis isn't you're not rejoicing. The diagnosis is you have forgotten that the Lord is near. One of the overarching teachings in the entire Bible is the teaching that God is with us. That's the heart of the Christmas story. Emmanuel, God is with us. That is the promise that God's Spirit dwells within us. That Jesus has sent a comforter. He has sent someone who is alongside of us. He is with us. And so when you start to think about what you're feeling and these feelings begin to overwhelm and override your life, the way to deal with it isn't to say, well, I'm not rejoicing, I need to rejoice. No, the way to deal with it is to understand that the Lord is near. Listen carefully to what Paul says in verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness or your inner disposition be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. And I think that if you kind of drill down into this text, this is the central thing we're getting at, is that the Lord is near. Ask yourself right now, what are you feeling? Are those feelings taking over your life because you have forgotten that the Lord is near? And if you want to really diagnose your problem, the problem isn't fear, worry, anger, loneliness, distrust, or whatever you're feeling. The diagnosis is we have forgotten that the Lord is near. Now, once we remember that the Lord is near and our focus is on the Lord, then we're able to rejoice. So what's the cure and what's the care for our lives in this particular scenario out of Philippians 4? Well, the cure then is found in verse number 6. Don't be anxious, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And then the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And so if I'm going to remember that the Lord is near, it will come as I invest myself more and more in prayer with thanksgiving, knowing that God, through my prayers and through His Word, is guarding my heart and He's guarding my mind in Christ Jesus, the Lord who is near. And then the ongoing care, which will be needed, because once you diagnose symptoms properly, you announce the cure, well then care is needed. And the ongoing care is found in verse number 8. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of a good report, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. And so where you set your mind is going to determine how you're dealing with your symptoms. If you set your mind on these things, on the fact that the Lord is near, not only do you get the cure, but you also get the care moving forward that is needed. Hey, we don't know how this is all going to turn out. Nobody knows. What we do know is that the promise is true, that regardless of our circumstances, the Lord is near. I commend that to you. If you have questions about it or want to interact with me, please do so. May the Lord bless.